Bye.
Yo,
What's up, dude?
what's up?
Not much. What's cracking?
Not much, man. I'm good. I'm excited. Sorry for the lack of like scenery and terrible.
Oh, dude, yeah, no, I feel you. I got a dog on the back couch back over there.
Oh,
Like,
nice. I
it,
see at least one plant in your shot. I have a coat rack, and that's
there's
it.
a plant. I know. I don't overly think it. Like,
Yeah.
and actually, my roommate is she's a teacher at Rutgers, so she's like, teaching right now also. So it's like we got to find our own spaces in the house.
Yeah, yeah. Dude, it's so crazy. Maggie's in class like all day, like
Oh
nine
wow,
to four, and it's all here. So she's kind of got the living room on lock. I got this little side room,
got it.
and it's like a new frontier for everybody. I feel like.
Yeah, big time. Quick question. What do you
Yeah.
see on your screen? Do you see the both of us or do you just see one at a time?
I have it set to see just you and then like a top toolbar of
Oh, okay. All right. So that's like an individual thing. Okay. Because I
yeah.
just have mine split and I'm just trying to. All right. Well, we'll just make it.
If you like hover over in the top right, it'll say like gallery view or
Right.
speaker view.
Yeah. Speaker view, gallery view. Okay,
Speaker view
cool.
is
Yeah.
kind of
I'm just
easy.
going to put it in gallery view for me. And I think it should record that way, but
Okay, cool.
sweet.
And
Cool,
I
man.
didn't know we were recording, dude. I didn't do my hair and makeup.
Yeah, it's funny, dude. It's funny doing the video conference thing. I don't know if you're doing it with work at all, but doing
Yeah.
the video conference thing, it's like you just think differently a little bit sometimes. You're just like, all right, I guess I can't do this in my pajamas.
Right. At least like the top up has to be
Yeah,
presentable.
exactly. So, and then quick question for you: do you have like an hour with us,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
okay, cool. I'm gonna just set a timer real quick because I don't know, just in case we lose track of time. I just don't want to. I don't want to keep you from the rest of your days.
No, it's all good, man. Things are very quiet, so I'm fine.
Okay, cool. Right on. Sweet. All right, so we'll just go ahead and get started. And I'm stoked to have you here. And this is really cool. This is actually our first speaker we've had in the class here, and I'm just really psyched because you're a friend of mine, so it makes it
Yeah.
comfortable and easy. And basically, I guess a little bit about mine and your relationship is I gave everybody like a little bit of a rundown. I gave them a link to your work, and I gave them a quick explanation, which we'll get into more about like how you operate and stuff like that. But your
Cool.
work is always like been inspirational to me, and I've been talking about this the past couple of weeks in class too. But like how like share your work with somebody you trust, and dude, whenever I share my work with you and you're like, oh, that's cool, like inside I'm like, oh, okay, cool, like I should follow this. So I've always looked at your visual sense as like a very strong um, a strong decider sometimes in even my own work. So I guess we'll just start off if you could just give like a basic rundown of who you are as a photographer maybe, and you could take that wherever you want.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks, man. That was super nice. And I feel the same way. I feel like Brian and I met, we're kind of just introed by mutual friends. We're both from the same area in New Jersey, but had never actually like crossed paths, which is kind of funny. It was like a two ships passing in the night thing.
Totally.
And then when we did meet a few years ago, hit it off right away. And yeah, dude, it's been great to share that passion with you and have those conversations. And I've found it super helpful as well. Um, so my background is in photography, like in school too. I went to Drexel University in Philadelphia. I studied photography and art history. I knew that I never really wanted to get into the like freelance side of things or the kind of like independent contractor side of things. Like I never really wanted to be like a photographer uh, for hire in a way, I guess. I
Yeah.
knew that I wanted to have like a more like kind of steady paycheck, ideally like a job in photography or like adjacent to photography, but not necessarily like out there shooting every day or having my own
Yeah.
studio or anything like that.
We have
So
some students like that too in class, which is awesome.
okay,
Maybe
okay,
tell everybody real quick what you do during your day job, because I think it's
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah. So I graduated school and I had gotten an internship at a photography gallery in New York while I was at school. when I graduated, that led to a full-time job at a different gallery. So I was kind of in the art world, like working in Chelsea, which is in like the neighborhood in New York where all the galleries are. So I was kind of like immersed in that, and that was really good for me as far as like kind of not living in like a vacuum. Like you're kind of part of like not a scene per se, but you're just like able to go and see shows or look at other art and kind of get new influences and like kind of touch points for your own work that you then kind of internalize. But so I worked at a gallery for a while, and I then a couple years ago moved on to this other company that's called Arta, and it's pretty much like the Expedia or the kayak.com for fine art shipping. So if you're a gallery or a museum or a private collector, you can go to Arta and get quotes to ship your artwork all over the world instead of just having to go to like each individual company on its own. We kind of aggregate it all. We have a network of like hundreds of shippers. So that's my day-to-day full-time job, 40 plus hours a week. And I've always liked that. I've always liked being able to have a full-time job, like I said, so that I don't like have to worry about where the next paycheck's coming from. That just like I wouldn't be able to be that type. I can't tell you how much I respect people that do live that way, but I would just lose my shit if that was me. So
Yeah. Does that allow you to kind of look at what you'd like to shoot in a more critical way? Like, do you find that, do you think that maybe you have the creative space to really run with an idea?
yeah, I think that's like having to not worry about paying the bills with photography has allowed me to really just like put my creative uh, aspects, creative juices like towards photography instead of having to have it become like a job and then also make a creative side out of it. I've been able to only look at photography in a creative way and make like personal work instead of having to do, like I said, have a studio or like get editorial jobs or anything like that. So it's freed up that, yeah, it's freed up photography for me to just be like a creative outlet.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Like just being in that flow of like creativity and photography is like, I think that's really what like unites us all as photographers is that, when you have the lens up to your eyes and you're looking at something, or sometimes just for me, looking through the viewfinder at a subject just makes me look at the subject more even than with my own two eyes. So I think like that it just that meditation and being in that place is where we all like to be, and even if I'm looking at like, a flower or like a grain of sand or something stupid. I think just being in that moment is really, really is kind of fulfilling. Whether we're actually going to use the work we're making or it's just like like that meditation. For
right.
us.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Uh, okay.
which is, and again, that's like what I strive for, right? And I would hate to have that soured by having to make a living with photography 40 hours a week.
And
Um,
what is it that you like to shoot, or what do you like to see, or what do you pursue?
yeah, so so I'm from the Jersey Shore, just like Ryan. We kind of both grew up, again, not together, but like in our own way in the same area. And I think there's a lot of overlap in what we're interested in. But growing up there, you kind of always look forward to the off season when all the tourists kind of go away and things quiet down, and you kind of have uh, the landscape, the beach, like to yourself again. You can kind of like roam freely. There's no traffic. And it's funny, I always like worked, through high school and like even college, like home for the summer. I was always like working at uh, beach clubs or like car parking at like a beach club, and you kind of have no choice but to like get immersed in the tourism side too. But yeah, my favorite parts in the times of year were always like when things quieted down. So when I was in school and I was like looking for, you're kind of tasked with going out and not only doing like your typical courses, like, learning the digital side, learning the printing side, but then you're also tasked with like, all right, go out and like make personal work. Like, what's your like thesis project going to be? Things
Right.
like that. So I was really drawn back home to the Jersey Shore. So I would make these trips. It's funny, not so much like back to the area that I'm from, but kind of the different parts of the Jersey Shore. It was kind of like an exploration adventure type approach to it. I've always and still do operate that way, where step one is like, well, step one of shooting at least is getting in the car, driving around, being like hyper aware of my surroundings and like
Right.
in the headspace where you're looking for photography and or for images, and and yeah, and then and seeing what you find. So it's, for me during school, it was going home, going to the different parts of the Jersey Shore, some of which I'd like never seen before. I think Jersey coastline's like 130 miles, but so
Yeah.
it's relatively small, but there were still parts I had never laid eyes on. So that was like really inspiring for me, was to make pictures with like the general area that I was familiar with, but not necessarily like these small pockets that I had never been to before. And after graduation, I was still really like invested in that. I was lucky enough to receive a grant from the state of New Jersey, the State Council on the Arts, and it was pretty much like a no holds barred. They like cut you a check, and then they're just like, go do with
Awesome.
it what you will. Um, I could have like, there was no attachments. I could have bought a car if I wanted to. Not that it was like that much money,
Here,
but
go make some photos. Here's a car.
yeah, exactly. But again, because I had a day job, I was able to put all of that grant money, and it was a couple $1,000s. It was like a good amount of money.
Nice.
Put all that towards my work. So I bought a camera. I shoot film. I bought a ton of film. I paid for all the processing, and I did this project on this area in South Jersey on the coast called the Wildwoods. It's like this 5-mile barrier island, and they have this I guess you'd say population or concentration of post-war motels. So all these motels that were built in like the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, because there was this huge influx of tourism to the Jersey Shore. So in this 5-mile radius, at one point there were like 300 of these motels, and they were all super similar in how they were built, in what their function was, but in order to set themselves apart from one another, they were like doing so with different themes or different colors, or signage is a big thing, like
How'd
neon signs.
you how'd you find Wildwood? Because if so, like we're from like north of there, about an hour and a half or something. And you went to school in at Drexel, and so I imagine that's straight across, the
Right.
state. But like, how did like this? Because this work has become like a book for you. It's become like you're
Yeah.
showing in galleries. Like it's where did this place come from?
Yeah, it's perfect question, because it segues back to what I was doing while I was at school, when I was getting in the car and kind of exploring different parts of the Jersey Shore that I'd never seen before. I literally stumbled upon Wildwood. I'd always like heard about it. I think I went there when I was like 19 years old for a night of just like drunken debauchery, but like
Yeah.
I never like kind of saw it for what it was. And when I was at school, I happened upon it, and I was like, what is this place? Like, it was literally like being transported to like another world, because it was
Awesome.
like probably January, February, winter time at the beach. So that's going to be quiet as is, right? But when the entire town is pretty much built of these motels that are closed for like 9 months out of the year, it felt like I had like stumbled upon, like, I always say, like an abandoned film set, or like a back lot, you know what I mean? Something like that. And I remember like I made a few pictures that day, like I guess that was 2011, 2012. And then I made a mental note, like, there's more here. Like, I got to come back here. And it took me a few years until, I got that grant, and I was able to kind of go back out and explore. And I was like, wait, like, this is the time to do the Wildwoods stuff. So I over the course of the next 2 years, I went back, made multiple trips. I would like stay in the motels when I went down there, which was cool.
Yeah.
I was the only one there because it was, again, like the middle of winter. I decided to pretty much photograph them exclusively during the off season too, so that it kind of allowed for the motels and the structures, the architecture to kind of like be in the forefront instead of having to compete with people or like beach towels draped over the railing or whatever. So,
So
um,
it sounds like you really thought about this. Is this, are you speaking from hindsight, or like did you think ahead of time? Like did you plan this? Like, once you started being like, okay, wow, this is gonna happen. I can come back here. I got this grant, and like how am I
yeah,
gonna, like, did you think, how am I gonna approach this? Or did you just like get there and just like shoot everything? And what was your process like?
yeah, I think, I guess starting with that project and everything, like all my work that I've done, subsequently, it kind of does start with like an idea, right? Of like, okay, I have these, like this area in my head, or I have these parameters in my head, or I'm thinking about certain things. And then from that, I kind of start doing like research, for lack of a better term. I guess that makes sense. But
Yeah.
um, so like take the Wildwoods as the example, right? So I got the grant. I'm like, okay, this would be a good time to go back and revisit the Wildwoods. So I started like Googling a ton, going to the library, buying like books, and through that research, like found out how much more history and like cultural relevance and like historical importance there is to this area, right? Like it's
Yeah.
not just a bunch of like old colorful buildings. Like it's, there's like all this history, and it was like a historic, um it's like designated as like a historic district in New Jersey, which was really cool. I didn't know that. So all of that kind of history informed the approach that I ended up taking, I guess you could say. So yeah, so there was, I guess, a lot of like prep work, right? Like even if you're doing, right, like, and you'll do like an editorial job, and I know that you'll have like, at least days of like prep work of like, all right, how am I going to shoot this? You got to talk
Right.
to everyone involved. Like that was kind of the same thing I was doing, but it was just like by myself. It was more on like,
Yeah, it's like a self-assignment, dude. It's
yeah,
like, if anything, it's probably it's a more difficult task, because you're like, oh shit. Especially when you feel like you have the freedom, you're like, oh, what am I gonna do, or how am I gonna do it? Do you find that like doing the research about a place and then like sort of organizing things that way sort of helps you like move into that creative flow, or helps you see better? Do you think that adds to your process?
yeah. I think like I'm like a very like pragmatic person. So it's like, I can't just like get a grant like that and then just fucking wing it and go for it. Like I had to, I had to really like, I like work best within parameters, or like a predetermined like set of, not rules, but just like, ideas that you're like working within, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there was like, I remember I like, there were a couple people like architectural, I don't know if they were historians or like what, but I was living in the city in New York, and I realized that there were a couple people, that had been involved with those motels like over the years, that were also living in New York. So I was just like hammering out emails, like doing cold outreach to people involved with, that had some involvement with those motels at some point. And I would like, I remember I got a couple drinks with people, like trying to just, it was like an investigative, like, you know, reporting almost. Like you
Yeah.
really like, you do all the research, and then, yeah, finally I felt like I was at a point where I actually then went and did like a recon mission during the summer, where I like spent hours kind of, and this is where like it gets a little type A and crazy, but like I spent hours just like going block to block and like making notes on
Oh,
like,
that's
hey,
awesome.
that motel's still there. Oh, that one's really sick. Definitely want to photograph that. Like even as far as like, okay, I'll need like late day light because it's facing west, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So doing like in the field like homework, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so that was in the summer. People were still there, so I knew in like the fall, and I guess so. Research started in like the spring. Did a recon mission in the summer, and then like in the fall into the winter, and then on and on was when I would make my trips down.
So from when you first, like, let's say, discovered Wildwood for yourself, and then what's about how long until like maybe you started actually shooting this work, because a lot of times, I mean, obviously we all know that it's not just pressing the button, but like,
Yeah.
as you're talking, I'm like, oh wow, this timeline's even longer than maybe I realize. And like, it takes a long time for an idea to like sometimes ferment in our heads, and like for us to actually do it. Like, a lot of times, especially now, it's like, oh, we want this now, we want to do this, but like really our most favorite work, I think, just takes a really long time. So when you started like actually pressing the shutter after all of this work, like how many years, or is it months, or like how long is it for you?
So I photographed, so like the lead up, so like I got the grant in, I think like February or March. From then until September, so like 5, 6 months, I was doing research, right? And like meeting with people, sending emails, communicating, having calls, and then starting in literally like after Labor Day, right? Like when the off season starts, started making trips down there, and it went until like a year and a half of trips.
Awesome.
And in between the trips, like I was saying, I shoot medium format film, so you get the film developed. I have like a shitty flatbed scanner at home, so I'll kind of just like scan them in quick for kind of like quick review of just like, okay, I like that one, I don't like that one. And
Right.
then in order to get like a really like high resolution scan, you either got to like pay for it, and it's not cheap. I actually would make trips back to Philadelphia and use Drexel's like $30,000 scanner. It's called like a drum scanner.
Yeah, sick.
And so, yeah, so I'd be making trips down to Wildwood, but then in like the weeks where I wasn't doing that, I still had a full-time job, but then maybe I'd make like a weekend jaunt out to Philly to scan a bunch, right? And
Yeah.
then I'd come home, and then, you got to edit the photos or like tune them. So each photo is like at least a couple hours of like
My God, dude,
just
holy
like
crap.
levels, exposure, contrast, like typical Photoshop shit. Um, so it was just like a long kind of process, and it's funny, I like look back on it now, and it was like I was like kind of like driven, like just like tunnel vision,
Yeah.
like because I was just so excited about it, and I was just like loving the work I was making. I was loving being out there shooting, but then also like the review process and the editing process was really fun.
That's how
Um,
you know it's real, dude. When you're
yeah,
like just possessed by it, and it's just
right.
like capturing your attention, and like, the things that we quote hate doing, like editing or sequencing, or like, we're like, oh, I just want to do it all, like when it's really got a hold of you, that's how you know it's something really real.
Totally,
And in
totally.
that same vein, it's like, I think about like your curation process. It's something I've been talking about in class here. Like, as a photographer, I mean, there's people out there who are curators. That's great for them. But like, we're also photographers. We have to like be a bunch of different things, and we have to do it in an honest, I think, manner with ourselves. And I'll say like your curation of images is so on point, dude. I always love what you share. And even when you draw from other photographers and like you add it to like, let's say, your Instagram feed, like those pictures of Bruce, you're always finding like the best ones, and especially ones I've never seen. And I'm like,
Ah,
how have I not seen this photo? How is this not a famous Bruce photo? Like, like I think that your eye and your selection is awesome. And
thanks.
how do you go about doing that for yourself?
I think it comes from like that aspect comes from, like I said, working in the art world. Like you kind of develop like it's like hard to talk about this without sounding like a pompous idiot, but like you kind of develop like an eye and like a taste for what's best. You know what I mean? Like if you like work in the music business and you're like an A&R guy who like your job is to like go to shows and like find new bands, like you're eventually gonna like be able to tell what's of a higher quality than like not, and like what resonates then with you personally too, as opposed to like, you know, maybe just because it resonates with like hundreds of thousands of people doesn't mean that it's like really of like good quality. You know what I mean? So you're kind
Right.
of able to like differentiate between the two. I think that like honestly though, like the Wildwood stuff, Ebb Tide was the name of the project, was my first instance of like really being able to like parse through a bunch of work and be like, okay, that's a really strong image. that one too can like stand on its own. But oh, then there's this image. It's good, but it kind of needs some like supporting help, right? So whether that means like it works best if it's in like a sequence, like you said, like or in a book or whatever. Like, so that was really fun, and that's what got when it came time a couple years ago to do a book. I knew that obviously the ebb tide wildwood stuff would be like the kind of nucleus of it, like the center of it. But I definitely knew too that I wanted to add other work that I had made over, the last few years. Because I think that adding those kind of like curveballs or like those images that were outside of the ebb tide project, like it strengthened the book as a whole.
Did you feel like you were taking a couple different portfolios and trying to maybe put them together like in a more seamless manner?
Yeah, so I pulled a lot of them. So I did a book, and like I said, I knew I didn't want to just do a book on the ebb tide project, right? So what I did, there it is, and so I knew I wanted to add more work in, and even though that motel stuff was the most recent stuff I had done, I didn't feel there was like an issue with pulling from like my archive or whatever, like years of work past. So a lot of the work in the book is stuff like I made when I was at school, or I made with like a kind of 35 millimeter camera in between school and like getting that grant and that stuff. So and like I said, I think it really benefited the final product, right? But also just like it gave a better like feeling to the sequence of the book, like as a whole. Like it helped. Adding in some like other images really helped certain images that might not have stood as strongly like on their own.
Yeah, for sure. And it's dawning on me now. I think when we first met, you had told me like you were thinking about, or like you were trying to figure out a way to bring a book to life.
Yeah,
which I remember thinking that was like so awesome. And it's been really cool to like be like, not to sound like a pomp sazzle, to be me, selfishly, because like I get to see like you do this thing that I think is incredible, so like it's maybe can you take us through the process of like starting, because like I remember you're like, yeah, like I'm trying to find like a place to like make this book, and like I know like just from what you've told me, like it's such a process. So maybe if you could give a little synopsis on how you went through it and how you went about it, because I know it's like the ultimate for photographers, and it is probably also is like the ultimate hard thing to do too.
Yeah, so I like you said, I knew I came out with the ebb tide stuff, right? The wildwood stuff, and it like caught fire. Like it
For sure,
a
you're
lot
getting
of
a ton of traction.
yeah. I had so when I felt like that project was ready to go, like I had enough images where I was like, all right, I'm gonna throw it on my website and I'm gonna start just like hammering out cold emails to photo editors and magazines and whatever, just like not so much as like give me work because of this project. It was more like I had this project, why don't we do like a digital feature or whatever you want to call it, portfolio.
Yeah.
So heard back from somebody at Slate, which is like I don't even know if it's still around. I think it is. It's like it's like a news website. They were pretty big for a while. I don't know if they still are, whatever. And I just heard back from this guy within 20 minutes. He's like, Tyler, love the work. Let's do it. And we had like a call and he kind of interviewed me and he came out with this article that featured, it was all about the ebb tide project. And it kind of had like writing, like he wrote up like a little essay with it, which was cool, like about me, about my work. So that was like literally like step one. And because content, even back in 2016 was like, is so key, other outlets saw it, wanted to also feature it, and they kind of like snowballed over the course of like a year and a half, where I was getting like these like features every, I don't know, a couple months, maybe once a month, whatever.
Yeah.
So that kind of led to an opportunity to like have a book. I published it with this company called Ain't Bad, and they're based down in Savannah, Georgia, and they're most known for their like photo blog and website that they have, where they feature new and emerging photography. And they'd contacted me to feature the project, and I featured it. And then they said, I like was looking on their website. I'm like, oh, they do books. So when it came time to want to do a book, I was like reaching out to them. It's two guys that run the whole shop, and they have so much going on. So they're busy as hell. I wasn't hearing back. So I'm a little like persistent, and they were showing in, they had a table at like an art book fair in New York a couple of years ago. And I just like showed up in person, and I was like, hey guys, like I'm Tyler Haughey, like we've been corresponding. And it was kind of that split second of like, oh, Tyler, man, I'm so sorry. Like I'm like, no, it's all good. Like, it's all good. I just wanted to like meet and, you know, see what's up and whatever. And so that in-person surprise attack is kind of what like finally set it in motion.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
So, yeah, you just gotta be persistent. But yeah, so then the process really started. Then it was about, okay, what do I really want to have in this book? Like I knew I didn't want to do.
Did you have full creative control over what was being selected?
Wow. Yeah, they were really cool with just like, you know, we know your work. We want to do a book of your work. Like, for full transparency, like the artist like pays for the whole thing when you work with them. So I guess that also like gave me additional clout, right? If I'm footing the bill, I can kind of do what I want with it. So yeah, started going through like the ebb tide stuff, what I definitely wanted to feature in the book. And then it was like, okay, let me look back too and add some prior images that I had taken. Let me add those into the sequence and into the edit so that I kind of get this new like holistic approach to my work, right? They call it like a monograph. So it's like a full kind of like, not so much like a project centric book, but more just like my work up until that time.
Yeah. Like your creative vision basically in one place.
Exactly. So yeah, so then it was about like, I remember I printed out like 75 little like 3x4 photographs and like taped them all up on my wall, and like would just mess around with like different sequences and edits, and that to me was just like so much fun. Like it was just such a good time. And that was over the course of, I guess, like mostly a few weeks, and then like here and there you could say.
Did you lean on anybody's like opinion, or did you kind of keep this one close to you, or did you share this with anybody to sort of help maybe you see things or pick things out?
Definitely. One of my closest friends, his name's Adam Cade. He's a great photographer in his own right, and him and I are kind of like nerds about this shit, right? And we have like a lot of like overlap in our interests. So yeah, there was a couple nights where he came over, we had some drinks, and we just like kind of had at it, and we're messing around. And yeah, I think the final sequence that ended up in the book has his touch on it a lot. And then Maggie too. My wife is really always like super helpful to offer up like a outsider's perspective, not necessarily like outsider, but just like someone other than me. So that was great too. She was super helpful. And yeah, so then I think it went to press in April of 2018, and then we released it in June at a book fair in Philadelphia. So it was cool.
Cool. Yeah. And I also, you did like a gallery showing with in the city, like in conjunction with like the book release, or at least that was my, you know, obviously I knew you were doing the book, but that was my intro to like, cool, Tyler's doing this thing, you know?
Yeah. So I forgot to mention real quick. I knew that I wanted to have like an essay in the book too, that kind of like contextualized the work a little bit. And someone, his name's Adam Ryan. He was a curator at SF MoMA, like a photography curator at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Yeah. And he had followed me on Instagram like a couple months like before the whole book process started. And I was like, oh, I definitely want somebody like that has some kind of like art world clout, photography clout to like add some words to this. And turns out I like went to his, like I was kind of Googling around for him because he stuck out of my head. He's from New Jersey. He's from South Jersey. So I was like, this is like a match made in Jersey heaven here.
Yeah, seriously.
So I reached out to him and he got back to me, and we've developed a friendship still that we have, which is great. And he was able to write an essay for the book. So that was like a just bonus, amazing aspect too. But yeah, to get back to your question, while I was working my day job at the art gallery, I had, you just kind of develop other contacts in the industry. And
yeah,
I had met this other gallery that I'd become like really friendly with, just on like a truly like a friendship type of way. And they knew I had gotten the grant. They knew I was working on this project. I was kind of showing the principal there, like, work as I went. And then once I had that feature kind of like go live with Slate that we were talking about, I also like took not only that article, but then like the kind of finished body of work to them. And they were like really excited about it. And they like took in some of the prints for their inventory and put them up on the website. So that turned into like being represented by them and like showing my work with them. They have a space in New York, they have a space in LA. And yeah, and then they held like a book release party for me at the gallery, which was super fun, and still to this day like surreal that.
Yeah, that was so cool.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. So this everything that's like, in Everything is Regional, do you now, after, let's say, making that book, do you now approach your work differently? Because I would say like maybe before you have that work, and what'd you call it, a monograph, right?
Yeah.
So maybe before you have something like that, and like you're in Wildwood and you're like seeing these things and you're planning out and you're taking pictures, and like when you're in that moment, you're like, or in that project, you're like, all right, Wildwood, this is like what's on my mind, this is what I'm thinking. And then like, this is like, having a monograph is almost like an evolution, because, now you're not thinking so singular about a one place and one thing, but how do these different places relate? And I think that's great, like a great play on like, everything is regional. It's all regional, but like it can all relate. So how does that let's call it some sort of transformation, like making a book, you come out differently on the other side, and how do you maybe reconcile that with what you maybe were, how you originally thought about it?
Dude, you are really good at this. You're asking phenomenal questions. Like I'm dead serious. This is really great.
It's fun, man. It's fun. I'm happy I get to pick your brain.
Yeah, and it's like you're prompting me into like everything that I've like been thinking about. So it's fun for me to like talk about it. So I published the book, right? And like I hadn't really made any like new work, especially in like the sense of like a project, since that Wildwood stuff, right? So I feel like with the Wildwood stuff, it was kind of just cut and dry. Like there's this place that's only like 5 square miles, and it's got a bunch of motels in there, and you're going to go in the off season and you're going to make the best pictures you can with those motels. And it's like great. Like I said, like I work best when it's like kind of like there's a set of like rules and like parameters you're working with. But since the book, I don't just want to like, it sounds kind of cliche, but like I don't just want to like repeat myself. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to just find another town that has interesting architecture and just like turn in a solid like representation of that.
Yeah.
I want to like, use what I've been thinking about and like looking at and like kind of show some like progress here. But for me, I think also that comes with like taking a more loose approach. So not necessarily having such tight parameters or rules that are like preconceived, like just kind of getting out there, seeing what I find, seeing what I'm drawn to, and then maybe the project is made in like the editing or the sequencing were I to like do another book or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's not so much like rigid. It's just more, and Ryan, you kind of alluded to this, like it's taking my like interests that are like in me, no matter like what I'm shooting, right? Like looking back at the book and like finding those threads that run through all the work, So definitely continuing to like use those in the new stuff that I want to make and am making, but then also like folding in the other things I'm thinking about, and like other work that I'm being influenced by
Yeah.
too. And dude, it's been like hard for me, and I feel like I'm still in a place where like I'm not fully comfortable or like sold on that, but I know that like I want to challenge myself. I want to kind of, like I said, progress or grow, and like um yeah, it's been tough. So like there's been, so same deal, like I'll get in the car, I'll go out, I'll drive around for like hours, and like uh there's been instances where like I'm excited about the images that I get back, but um there's not that feeling yet of like what we were talking about, where you're just like tunnel vision, like I'm
Yeah.
souped on this, like I'm just going in. So I'm hoping that like comes, right? And it's only been like a year and a half since the book, so it's not like
Yeah.
too long, but
Dude,
um
it'll come. I feel like that's a
yeah,
part of like the creative process, is like, especially like when you're like, you've like just like amassed all of your creativity and you put it here, and then you finally have like condensed it and like put it into something, especially as concrete as a book, and push it out there. Like, you deserve a little brain space,
yeah,
to stop thinking so much about it, because
right,
the more you focus or think about creativity, is like sometimes it's like the longer the passage of time feels,
yeah,
so,
yeah,
and just like, dude, you drove around, you like found wildwood, and then like it became something.
right,
The same thing is going to happen. And like, if we know our own creative process and how we operate, which it sounds like you do, like you're like, man, I'm seeing stuff and I'm excited, but it's just hasn't caught a hold of you. Like, that's so like, it's going to happen, because
yeah,
like it's not like it's not gonna show itself somewhere. And like I said, I feel like this whole process for you was like an evolution, and in a way that only you understand, and like that is gonna put you out onto like a different place, where you're just, something's gonna come out of you, and then event, like, it'll be 5 years later, and you'll be looking back and be like, well, I know how it came out of me then,
yeah.
but like
No, I
right
know.
then I couldn't see it, it just was happening.
Yeah, dude, I think you're totally right. And I think it's just like, and this is a lesson, right? That I'm still in the midst of like learning. It's like, you kind of gotta, like, it's not always just gonna like fall in your lap. Like, you kind of gotta crawl around in the weeds for a little while to get to something that you're just like head over heels excited about.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like staying the course is like, yeah, it gets tough, but I'm like really trying to do it. Especially, dude, like with this shelter in place stuff, like
uh,
I'm home all day, and like I'm like, all right, I gotta like really try to use this for like, put some effort towards re-looking at the work I've made, making some edits, and like trying to get some like finished images out there. And
yeah.
but even again, like staying focused on that, it's like,
It,
yeah,
it can be
it's
tough, and like you can't
yeah,
always do, like, because
right,
the way creativity works is like, like, at least for me, like when it's flowing or when it's happening, I can do all the things that I know like facilitate creativity. But if
right,
it's not there, maybe it's not there, and that's okay. And like when it is there though, that's when I love to like seize a hold of it.
yeah,
So like, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves, be like, all right, I'm working from home, or I'm at home, or I'm not leaving. Like, I should be doing this stuff. But also, like, I think it's important to give ourselves a break too, at least
yeah,
for me, like, sometimes I will just like be like, all right, I need to do something. And then like, the more that I try to like think of something, or the harder it really is to kind of come up with anything.
dude, couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think like you said, like that the book came out, and I gave myself like brain space, which was awesome. I was finally just like I'm always like, reading and looking at stuff and thinking about work or photography, but like
Right.
I told myself like there's no pressure, you know what I mean? Like, you just like came out with this book. It's been like a pretty wild few years, like chill out.
Yeah.
It's, I always equate it to like a musical artist, right? Like a band, like you come out with a record that you've poured all your creative energy into, then you go and like tour it for a year or whatever, and then you like allow yourself a lot of time off, right? So
Yeah.
I felt like Ebb Tide being out there, that was like making the record. The book was kind of like the tour. This is a very loose
I love it, dude. No, I
Yeah,
love it.
interpretation. But now I've like taken, the last year plus off in a way, and I'm starting to get that itch of just like, all right, I gotta start moving again,
Yeah.
and getting going. So
Heck yeah.
yeah,
That's awesome. So I just want to throw it out there. If anybody's got questions,
yeah,
you're more than welcome. We got Tyler. He's a host of great knowledge here. So feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat whatever you feel comfortable with. Um, but yeah, just want to let you guys know that that's available. Corey, I see you.
Yeah,
Unmute
man.
yourself.
Yeah, got a question for you. Do you attribute most of like your ability to get out there from that first article on Slate, or like, is it like super key to make sure you do have a key partnership like that before you launch something? And I know that kind of like came to fruition, not as planned, but like next time you go around, would you make sure you have a key partnership like that lined up ahead of time?
dude, great question. I think, and I've actually thought about that since. I think it just was like serendipitous, right? Where I was like super lucky that it happened, and it happened right within like the few week window where I was like feeling like the work was ready to go, and the project was done. But no, I don't think that's required by any means. And should I make another project or want to do a new book, like I'm not going to feel like I need to have that partnership in order to release work. That's especially now where I kind of have, it's like, of course I say that now, cause like I have like, that structure already in place. Like I work with a gallery. Instagram is like a big thing. So like there's outlets now that I have that I probably didn't have a couple years ago when I released that work. So 4 years ago, Tyler might have given you a different answer, but I think it definitely like it helps, no doubt. I think it's worth putting in the effort. Like once the work is ready to go, worth putting in the effort of like doing some outreach to see if you can drum up interest in it before you actually launch it. You know what I mean? Or like maybe even like coming out with like a few images. Like again, it's the music thing. Like if a band's got a new record out, they're going to put like a single out there, maybe like a second song, like months before the album comes out. So like same kind of idea. Like if you have a project that you think is like 80% done and in a couple months it's going to be ready to like fully go, like start kind of trickling out, leaving some like breadcrumbs around to see if you get any interest in it. I definitely think that's like a successful way to do it.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And for marketing stuff, when you did this through, what was your like most successful channels when pushing this stuff out?
Man, so I guess I like started. It's crazy to think back. This was like 2016 when I first released the Ebtide project, like late 2016. So that's when I like actually started like a dedicated Instagram for my work, and I was like hashtag king, right? I'd put like 30 hashtags on like each post and like get all the like try to drum up interest that way, and it actually worked. I was way more like regimented with that, like all right, like do a post every day, every other day, whatever. So that was a big one for me. And then it was really just like building out like a contacts list, like an email list, whatever you would call that. Not necessarily for like me to send out updates to the whole list, but more to just like have that resource where I could like email people individually to gauge their interest, kind of just like I did with like the Slate guy, right? Like I put the work in to find all these people's contact info and then would like reach out and see what kind of happened. And then those articles that like would fall were kind of just like the marketing in and of itself. Yeah, I didn't really do much like other than that.
Sufficient. It's good stuff.
Thanks, man.
Sweet. Cool. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm glad you brought up the marketing stuff too. It goes in with, I forget, maybe that was like third month into the class here. Like I showed everybody how like you get my newsletter and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is all super important. And but yeah, also what I see too is that what I really like about your work too is, and I mean, this is almost like a way of marketing too, is like having the work in person. Like you're going to shows and you're displaying your work, and like that's like such a great way to like be person to person and talk. You know, it's one thing to like send an email and like that is awesome. I mean, that I do it so much in my own practice, you know, but like to have the piece there and then somebody could look up at it and like just really absorb it and then have the conversation with you, that's that's like, to me, that's like the best, that's the best form of like marketing.
Yeah, man. I think I remember like the first time you and I met, it was like, I remember I like felt like our drive really aligned. Like you were as like driven on like the cold outreach side as like I was. Like I remember we like, there was a time where we like exchanged.
Oh yeah, we probably traded like contacts and stuff,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, because there's that similar drive of like, if I want to get this out there, or if I want to get like people like, if I want to put myself on people's radar, like I'm going to do everything I possibly can to make that happen. And yeah, I totally remember aligning with you on that. But yeah, to your question or your point, the gallery has been like, it's been incredible. And again, the whole thing is still super surreal, but there's been a couple instances, one in New York and one in LA over the last like year and a half, where the gallery will get like a booth at an art fair, like a photography fair. So say there's like 70 galleries, each with a booth. The gallery that I work with was doing like a solo booth of my stuff. So that's just like,
that's amazing,
unbelievable. And yeah, I would go for the opening night and like go and maybe once or twice. They usually run like 4 days. So I go and just like kind of hang around. Like obviously don't want to like be like a leech and like right. Interrupt like what could possibly go on as far as sales. But
yeah.
We would always have like the book there, and it was like a cool opportunity. There's definitely times at like each fair where the gallery was like, oh, this is Tyler, like meet Tyler. And yeah, right, like you said, like having that in-person connection and then being able to be like, this is the work. Like
it's amazing.
Yeah, it's like going to like a bookshop and like an author's doing like a signing there.
Right.
Like you're more apt to buy the book if you're gonna have a connection with them. So
absolutely. Yeah. So that was the alarm there. I don't want to keep you too much unless anybody else has questions. We have a couple minutes for that.
Can I hop on with a quick one?
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you for sharing all that. I feel like I'm kind of at the same place about being ready to get a book off the ground, but I've heard from so many photographers who are like naysayers that I should either only think about self-publishing or I need to approach publishers with already like 20 grand ready to like cough up to make that happen. I'm curious if you went into your like, did you have your grant cover that? Did you do a Kickstarter? Just kind of like, I'm really determined to do this thing. I want a legitimate publisher behind me, but so many people have been like poo-pooing on me, and I'm just curious how you kind of went about that part of it.
Definitely. I think the guys that I ended up doing it with Ain't Bad were one of a handful of people that I tried to get in touch with. Again, a lot of it through just like cold outreach. Mm-hmm. And I remember I had at least 2 other conversations where just kind of like you said, Erica, like they were like, okay, cool. We could do it if you have like 30 grand or if you have like 20 grand. And I just remember being like, who would ever have that, like to do, a book or whatever. Yeah. So Ain't Bad was in this cool place where you pay up front for the whole thing, but like then you're gonna kind of like make your money back. So yeah, I definitely had some money left over from the grant. I had gotten some sales through the gallery, and again, thankfully, from having a day job, I can kind of silo all of my money that I get from photography like into its own thing. So I had like some grant money and then some like print sale money, and all in with Ain't Bad. Like again, for transparency here, it's like it was an edition of 500 books, and it came in like right around like $9,000. So don't get me wrong, it's a lot of money, but it's not like the 20 or 30,000 that other publishers do. But I think that there's like ways to get the backing of a publisher and like the ability to work with a publisher on like the more indie side of things. Like you don't have to go to like, I don't know, Rizzoli or like I don't even know like what huge publishers are, but I would think that you're probably always going to have to invest a little bit of it yourself though, at least a little, if not the whole thing. So no, I didn't do, again, I'm lucky enough where I didn't have to do a Kickstarter. I kind of had other outlets where I was able to have the funds from. And yeah, so the book's been out like a year and a half, and I've made back like, if not all of my money, but like enough where I didn't feel like I was like out $9,000. So.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sweet. Cool. Awesome. Dude, Ty, thanks so much, man. You brought so much value to this, and I was like happy to have a little video chat with my homie, but two, like just have you really just share your thoughts and your experience, and thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you being here.
Man, dude, it was like super helpful for me too. I love this. This was like, these kind of like creative conversations are so instrumental, and I feel like once you kind of get out of school, you kind of lose like that community feeling, and it's always good to like unpack things with like-minded people. So no, this was great. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. 100%. Cool. All right. Well, that's it for today. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, good to meet you guys.
And I will.
Oh, and wait, I should say quick. If Erica, Corey, if you guys want to follow up or like get in touch ever, like just ask Ryan for my contact info and absolutely reach out.
Right on. I'll share it with everybody for sure. Thanks, Ty.
Appreciate it, man.
Cool, guys. All right.
See ya. Bye-bye.
See ya.